Hey everybody, Craig Warwick here with a look at the Marvel Legends Iron Man figure from the Marvel 80th Anniversary line. Previously, I took a look at the Captain America figure, which I really liked, and the Iceman figure that, well, yeah. So I'm wondering how Iron Man will fare. Who's Iron Man, you ask? Really? Well, the 1966 cartoon summed it up pretty well. Tony Stark makes you feel he's a cool exec with a heart of steel. As Iron Man, all jets ablaze, he's fighting and smiting with repulsor rays. Amazing armor? That's Iron Man. A blazing power? That's Iron Man. Oh dear, I got a bit excited there. Better go for a lie down. Iron Man is looking great out of the package. This is his iconic classic look. Not his original look, or even his second or third look, but this is the Mark IV armour. The overall look of the figure is very substantial. Compared to a standard Bucky Cap figure, he looks appropriately bulkier and a little taller, like an armoured human should. Even comparing him to his fellow 80th anniversary Avenger, Captain America, and the modern Iron Man, he sizes up really nicely. On his own though, the figure still looks great. The sculpt is really nice, it's simple and effective. The musculature is exaggerated to the appropriate superhero proportions, and it captures that kooky classic Iron Man look that even though it's a suit of armour, it's not all straight lines and panel lines. Saying that, the ridges of his armour are nicely realised and his musculature isn't entirely organic, being very simplified, symmetrical and geometric. The ridges of his armour also continue onto his articulation discs. That's a really nice little piece of extra effort. The monobeam port is cleanly sculpted along with his, I don't know what the official name of his repulsion titties are, but anyway, they're looking good too. It seems that these elements are actually separate pieces that poke through from the underside of the chest sculpt. I wonder why that's happening, but I don't want to crack this torso open to find out more. The monobeam port, later called the unibeam, or the arc reactor in the movies, is actually a soft rubber piece. Again, I'm not sure why, but it works for me. The paint on the body is really good too. When they first showed this figure, it had a really great paint job, all shiny and metallic, and frankly, unbelievable that Hasbro were going to deliver anything at that level. But Hasbro then also showed this boxed mock-up of the figure with really zero paint at all, and to be honest, that's kind of where my low expectations were with this figure. Luckily, Hasbro have hit a decent middle ground. It's not the amazing display figure, but it's also not the horrific boxed mock-up. The red areas of the figure are cast in a red metallic plastic, but they receive no paint. I'm never much of a fan of this unpainted metallic plastic, as there are always inconsistent swirls in it, but it doesn't look too bad here. Mainly because it contrasts with the gold very nicely. The gold parts are again cast in a metallic plastic, gold this time of course, but they do actually receive an application of gold paint on the surface. You can see the difference between the nice gold paint and the flat gold plastic on the inside of his knee joints, for example. I'm pleased to see that the gold paint doesn't chip or rub off, especially around his hips. The yellow paint on his repulsor pasties is not so fortunate. It's quite sloppy and it's particularly bad on the repulsion ports on his fist. It's barely noticeable at a distance, but still. Moving on to the head sculpt, and it's really well done. It's simple and is, like the body, a great combination of smooth and angular shapes. The gold mask is a separate piece that is glued onto the head, so there's a nice sense of depth to his mouth and eyes. While looking at his head, it's as good a point as any to check out his accessories, as he comes with two additional heads. The first is an alternate version of his armoured head. The difference that immediately jumps out is the pronounced nose. In the comics, Iron Man's mask has had a nose, but it didn't look like this. This mask design is based on Alex Ross's artwork. There are a couple of subtler differences with this head though. He has a grill inside his mouth slit, and the jaw continues all the way round to the back of the head, rather than heading up to the ear as on the comic style head. Honestly, I'm not a fan of this head design and would rather have seen his horned mask instead, but it's a neat addition. Something I am absolutely a fan of though is his unmasked head. I'm blown away by how good this looks. The sculpt is amazing and the paint is equally great. The eyebrows, eyes, moustache and lips have been applied perfectly, and they don't have that dot printed effect that some MCU figures have. The sculpt really captures a classic cinematic heartthrob look for Tony Stark with shades of Clark Gable. It's really great. There is a slight gap between his head and his hairline, but because the hair is jet black, it's not very noticeable. I think this is the best head sculpt Hasbro have ever made, especially on a comic-based male character, and I can pretty much recommend this figure purely based on this accessory. It's that good. In case you're interested, it does fit on the modern Iron Man figure, but to my eye the classic styling looks a little wrong with the modern suit design. Iron Man's other accessories are alternate hands and blast effects. His alternate hands let him have 2 fists or 2 open-palmed repulsor blasting hands. These hands have a hole in the palm, so they look a little silly without the repulsor blast inserted. The repulsor blasts are a different coloured version of the blast we've seen with previous Iron Man figures. These ones are a pale yellow and fade to white at the tip. Like their ancestors, these again separate into 2 parts, the beam and the blast, and fit into either the holes in the open palm hands or the peg holes in the feet. Something new for these effects is this larger blast radius effect that the smaller blast and beam fit into. It has its own peg on the back to fit into the palm or foot holes. It's pale yellow plastic with no paint applied, and to be honest, it's a bit of overkill and unnecessary. I get that the flat yellow is maybe trying to capture a comic book aesthetic, but really, it looks less like energy and more like custard. I think it would have been a more useful accessory if instead of a peg it had a circle that plugged into the monobeam port on the chest. Anyway, this is what we got, so try not to lose it when you just slam it away in a drawer forever. Before we move on to his general articulation, it's worth noting that the open palm hands have that frustrating recent feature of Iron Man figures of having no hinge at the wrist. While it's all well and good for repulsor blast poses, if you want to pose Tony carrying his helmet, displaying 2 great head sculpts, then he's going to have to carry it weirdly with his fist. But let's take a look at more of his articulation. His head rotates and looks down this far, and up this far. His arms rotate at the shoulders and move this far up to the side. There's rotation at the top of the bicep, a double jointed elbow that bends this far, rotation at the wrist, and his fists hinge this far forward and back. As I mentioned before, his open palmed hands don't hinge forward or back, but they rotate at the wrist. He has an ab crunch that bends this far forward and back, and there's rotation at the waist. He can kick this far forward, but not back. His legs move this far out to the side. The power pods on his hips are a separate piece of softer plastic that's plugged into holes. They aren't removable, but they flex out the way so as not to block his legs from moving outwards. There's rotation at the top of the thigh, double jointed knees that bend this far, rotation at the top of the boot, hinges at the ankle that bend this far forward and back, and he has ankle rockers. And as the legend goes, this is his widest possible stance, still with both feet flat on the floor. So that about covers it all for the Invincible Iron Man. What a great figure. It really captures that classic look, has a good variety of good quality accessories, and just feels like a substantial figure and good value for money. In my opinion, this is the best figure of the most iconic look for the character there is. I really recommend you pick this figure up. I've seen some people post online about defects in the paint on the mask, so you might want to watch out for that if you can. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and of course for liking and subscribing. You can check out more reviews from me or some of my custom action figure work here on my channel, but wherever you go from here, pour on the power. Oh my. Bye bye.